We all know economic development is a team sport, and on that note, I can't imagine a better speaker with this venue as the backdrop to talk to our many NLEA members and partners and stakeholders.
The Northern Lakes Economic Alliance proudly welcomes 11-year NFL veteran and now fellow Northern Michigan resident, entrepreneur and father, Jon Jansen, as today's keynote speaker. As a captain of the Michigan Wolverines' 1997 National Championship football team, a team voted captain of the Washington Redskins, and being voted as one of the greatest offensive linemen in Redskins franchise history, Jon's success and reputation for hard work, teamwork, and leadership is beyond impressive. The Northern Lakes Economic Alliance welcomes Jon Jansen.
Well, thank you very much. And I tell you what, after seeing the band and being here in this great facility and seeing some of those highlights, if anybody wants to go one-on-one, I'm ready to play a game. We'll take volunteers. But, and preferably a Spartan. So I'm looking for my phone. And the only reason I'm looking for my phone is because I'm going to use it for its greatest purpose, a paperweight. But being an athlete has given me a lot of tools, and I've learned a lot of things from my teammates, from my coaches, from owners that have really served me well. Now that I'm a business owner, a broadcaster, and it's not necessarily just the successes that have taught me a lot of lessons. In 1997 we won a national championship, and there's a lot of lessons that I've taken from that, and most of you have probably heard all those stories probably more than once, because I love to tell a good story. But a lot of the lessons I learned were in the games that we had comebacks. From being knocked down and getting back up and fighting, and learning some of those tough lessons. And football is all about tough guys getting knocked down and getting back up to fight. And if those were the only two lessons that I learned, they would have served me very well. But as many of you know, in the business community, you can't solve a lot of problems with a fight. It might be easier, and more fun. But the one thing that one of the quotes that I've gotten from Don Brown, the defensive coordinator now for Michigan, is that when he has a problem on the football field, and this is one of the greatest quotes I've ever heard from a football coach, he likes to solve it with violence. And I think to myself, wait, that's great on the football field, but how do I use that in life? How do I use that? And I asked him about that, and he told me, he's like, it's not necessarily, I use the word violence, but it's also about being aggressive, and not being shy about what you want or what you want to accomplish. And when I look at what I'm doing now, obviously you can see what I'm wearing. I'm not shy. I try and blend in as much as I can, but the jacket always keeps pulling me out. But and he went a little bit further, and he talked about mental toughness, and some of the things that go into making an individual mentally tough. And he said, with football, you've got physical toughness because you're out there playing a physical game, you're playing a violent game. But when you're in the classroom, when you're in the locker room, when you're a business owner, when you're trying to create success in other areas of your life, I look back and I think, what were some of the lessons that I learned, or how did I learn to become a mentally tough individual? And I look back at my, like I said, some of you have heard a lot of my stories about the '97 team, but when I was thinking about talking today, I thought, what do I share with a community that knows a lot about you? And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go back to my redshirt freshman year and some of the lessons that we learned that in those first couple of years that really served us and paid off when we did win the national championship, and have served me well even to this day. And I look back at my first game at Michigan. I was a 19-year-old kid, and I hadn't played football in a year. I was redshirted my freshman year. Hadn't been in front of anybody. And the last time I was in front of somebody there's more people here now than were at my high school games. And there was definitely not a field like this. It was a multi-use field, but we had soccer players and the band, and our grass was more dirt than grass. So the field that I was playing on then was a little bit different than the big house. When I ran out at the big house, I was running out in front of 110,000 people. I was running out in front of probably another couple of million people on TV. And my first game, which I usually don't talk about a lot, was not spectacular. I got benched at halftime. I'd given up a sack early in, and some of you Michigan fans, some of you college football fans might remember it was a kickoff classic. It was the only game that weekend that was on TV. So there was even more people watching the game, and watching it in slow-mo too, going, boy, I don't know if that kid is any good. And we went on, it was against Virginia, we went on to win that game, but I really didn't feel like I was a part of that victory. Because I had been benched, we were down at halftime, and the team came back without me to win. I thought, how's that possible? And we get into film the next day, and my coach, Mike DeBoard, who's been a head coach and is now the offensive coordinator at the University of Indiana, sat me down, and we went over some of the mistakes, and coaches, and one of the first lessons that I learned was that football coaches are very honest and direct. And he basically the first thing he said was, Jansen, that's not good enough. And I get close to a football field, my vocabulary gets a little bit limited, but I know we've got Dr. Skolton here, and I apologize ahead of time if I let anything slip. But he basically, in no uncertain terms, he said, get your head out of your ass. You put in the work. You put in all of this stuff. We recruited you because we knew you could play. We knew you could perform. And halfway through the year, just to fast forward just a little bit, I think he even shortened it, and he would look at me and just say, Jansen, head out of ass. And so the one thing that I learned is that, and then he would tell me, hey, you got to step here, you got to do this with your hands, you got to put your head here, you got to do all of those different things. But the feedback from football coaches is instant and it's honest. And when I look at what I do with my coaches now at CrossFit, or when I'm on a broadcast, and I'm talking to either my camera guy or the sound guy, you've got to be honest. You can't beat around the bush. Nobody likes to have smoke blowing up their tailpipe. I don't like it. Nobody else likes it. I just want to know exactly where I stand, how I'm going to be treated, how you view me, so that I can move forward and improve. And the other thing that he taught me was that you got to have short-term memory. And by that, he wanted to know what kind of short-term memory I have. And you could kind of lump in confidence into this as well. But he told me that you cannot let one game run over into another game. You can't let one play affect how your next play was, whether it was bad or successful. You can't go around beating your chest going, I'm the greatest thing around, because if you're doing that, that's time lost. That's money lost for what you have to do next week or next play. And you see a lot of the young players, and that's really why I think he pulled me out in that first half, because I'd given up that sack, and I was sitting there going, I don't have the tools yet to get this done. And he said, one of the things you have to do is you have to move on. We can make corrections later. You can get back in the office and you can tweak a proposal and you can do a lot of different things. But when it comes down to it, when you're when it's test time, game time, you're on the line, you have to make those corrections. You have to move on. You can't let one thing roll into another. I'm just going to let those blow around. Tired of fighting it. One of the things I learned from Marty Schottenheimer, I know a lot of you guys and gals that follow the NFL know that Marty Schottenheimer has been a coach at a lot of different places. And he was only my coach for 1 year. And when it goes back to the instant and honest feedback, he was my coach my third year in the NFL, only for one season, but after that season, we had what they call an expansion draft. Houston was now going to get their team, is now the Houston Texans. And he had to put 8 guys up in the expansion draft. And it could have been a rookie, could have been a 10-year vet, didn't matter who it was. And one of my best friends on the team got put into that expansion draft. And I asked him, I said, hey, you started this year, what did Marty tell you as to why you're up for the expansion draft? And this is one of the things that I loved about Marty, and we called it the truth according to Marty, because you may not agree with him and he would allow you to disagree, but he would tell you exactly what he thought, where you stood. And he said, you know what? He said, Marty told him, you're a great player, and you could do a lot of great things in the NFL, but you're expendable. You're a guy that we can afford to lose. And you're probably sitting there going, gosh, that's kind of harsh. And it does feel that way, but there was no mystery. One of the things about being in the NFL is that not everybody will tell you exactly where you stand, until they cut you, and then you're left wondering what happened. And he told Matt, my buddy Matt, I was trying not to use his name, but I can't tell the story without using his name, that, hey, you're a guy that we can afford to lose. And he ended up getting taken in the expansion draft. But one of the things that he talked about, Matt did and Marty did, is I will always tell you where you stand. We can disagree, but when it comes down to it, I'm the boss, and it really doesn't matter. So one of the things that we loved about him was the fact that, here goes another one, that he had that ability to let us know where he stood. So I fast forward just a little bit more because I don't know what was on that last sheet. I'm just kidding. I do, but it's not important anymore. So I think to myself, okay, what was probably the most important lesson that I learned? And I think for me it was about competing. And everybody asks me now that Jim Harbaugh is at Michigan and he's got this, 4 or 5 quarterbacks that are competing for a position. How does that affect Wilton Spate, who's the starter? How does that impact the guys that are the backup? And my response has always been, well, first of all, competition forces you to get better. And it doesn't matter to me. Everybody knows that now there's a new CrossFit just down the road on 119 in Harbor Springs. I think that's great. All right. Ken Probus. Is Ken here today? Ken. I'll have to. Everybody text him when you leave there and ask him why the hell he's not here. But Ken has one down in Charlevoix. And to me, I think that's awesome because it forces me to improve what I'm doing. It forces them to improve what you're doing. And the competition for me was never about, even now, it's not about Ken. It's not about Mr. Behan. It's not about any of those things. It's about how can I improve myself? How can I get better? Because I'm always competing against myself. And everybody asks me, well, how does that improve you as a teammate? Because you're playing a team sport. You've got to have guys on your team. And I tell them, well, the competition has always been with myself. And it's like preparing for today. I want to give a better speech. I want to be better at what I'm doing today than I was yesterday. And there's really nobody that can be the judge of that but me. When I would go out and play against guys like Reggie White, Kevin Green, Javon Curse, a lot of people would ask me, there's a lot of pressure. You got a lot of people watching you. And it's not about the pressure that I felt facing those guys or being on TV. It was about the pressure I put on myself to be better than I was yesterday. And I look at my business now and I think, well, how can I make my business better today than it was yesterday? How can I compete with myself? Because when I do that, it takes the pressure away. When I look at all of you, and yes, some of you are my friends, and it's harder to speak in front of friends than it is complete strangers. So half of you I have no pressure from. The other half, I'm feeling a little bit. But that's one of the things that I learned about competition was it was about preparation. If I took as many variables out as I could, if I spent time in the film room, if I spent time in the weight room, in the training room, with my nutrition, and all of those things, if I made them really constant variables, then it really didn't matter who lined up against me because I knew their game better than they knew it. I knew what they were going to do. I knew if a linebacker lined up on the line of scrimmage on the other side, what it meant for my defensive player. So that's how I took the pressure out of it, was competing against myself and making sure that every day, every week, that I was better than I was the last time. I'll pick it up, I promise. And when I take all of those things and I look at, all right, the honest feedback and the short-term memory concept that I had and the competition with myself, I think, how did I have success in football when there were a lot of guys that were more talented than me? When I was at Michigan, every year, they're bringing in another 5-star guy that's supposed to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. How was I able to start for 4 years and not get replaced by one of those guys? And I think we all know people that have a lot of talent. We all know people that if it was just up to talent, we would not be able to compete against them. But there's a book by Angela Duckworth, and I don't know if some of you have read it or not. I highly recommend it. It's called Grit: The Power of Passion and Perseverance, and it examines why some people are successful and others aren't, even when they have a lot of talent. In short, it talks about the returns that you get from effort. And what she talks about in that book is everybody can give an effort for a short time, but how do you sustain that effort? How do you get, as a math teacher, you've got kids that are excellent at math, and you have other ones that struggle. But when it came to test time, it wasn't always the kids that had the talent in math or saw math as easy that were always the best students. Some of her best students were getting the best grades because of the effort they put into it, and it was a sustained effort. Well, how do you get that sustained effort? Well, it goes back to the passion. Why was I good at football? Why was I able to play 12 years in the NFL? It was because it was exactly what I wanted to be doing. I had a passion for it, and you all know that our job, there's no easy job. And if you can do the homework behind it, you can study, you can prepare and do all the things behind the scenes that nobody sees, but it's something that you have a passion for, it's going to long outlast anything that you're just doing because it's a paycheck. All right, none of us, there are times that we do things just for a paycheck, but if we're going to look at a career and be successful at it over 30 or 40 years, it's got to be something that you love to do, or you're just going to be average at it. So as I wrap up, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me today. But when you look at the organization that you're a part of, and you look at your businesses, don't be afraid to compete with each other. Don't be afraid to look at it and compete with yourself. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because you got to have that short-term memory that says, hey, I'm going to learn from it, but I'm going to move on. I'm not going to let it affect me today. I'm not going to let it affect me next week. And use some of those lessons that I've learned to help you guys move forward in your businesses and with this organization. Thank you very much for having me.